We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast was recorded, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Welcome to the podcast series of Raising the Bar Melbourne, curated by the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences at the University of Melbourne. This special health edition of Raising the Bar, held in May of 2026, featured 20 talks by some of Melbourne's leading healthcare experts and was held across 10 pubs and bars, all in one night. The speakers presented topics ranging from AI and cancer research to understanding ADHD and neurodiversity, helping kids sleep, healthy social media habits, the future of robotic surgery, and much more. In this episode, you'll hear Professor Michelle Jongenelis talk about how children and young people are targeted by harmful industries like tobacco and gambling for profit.
I have a few stories to share today. I hope that they do the storytelling of the traditional owners some justice. I doubt it. They have a certain flair about them. So a little bit about myself. My name is Michelle Jongenelis. I'm Director of the Melbourne Centre for Behaviour Change. I've been working broadly in what we call the commercial determinants of health space for about 13 years now. So my interest is really in risk factors for non-communicable diseases, things like cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all of that stuff. So what I'm going to start with is it's a bit of a morbid activity. So you're going to have to bear with me. I want the back three rows. Can you stand up for me? The back 2 rows are empty. So the back 3 rows where there are people seated, if you can all stand up. Now, I'm really sorry, but that's the proportion of people in this room who will at one stage in their life be diagnosed with a non-communicable disease. That's your future. These diseases cause 41 million deaths every year. Okay? Now, I want the 2 rows closest to me to sit down. So how many people have we got left? It's really dark. 5 people left. Great. So here's the good news. I just prevented 80% of those diseases. That's all we've got left. And I'm going to tell you tonight how we prevent those diseases, or how we can prevent those diseases if we put our minds to it and stand up to harmful industries. You guys can sit down now. Okay, so how do we prevent 80% of non-communicable disease cases? I'm just going to say NCDs from now on. So the overriding narrative that these industries put out is that it's your fault. You are responsible for your health. It is your fault that you're smoking, that you're drinking, that you're eating poorly, that you're not eating fruit and vegetables. It's up to you. All they're doing is producing a product, but it's up to you as to whether you consume that product. Now, the industries that are pushing this narrative cause 21 million deaths every year. And the predominant industries that are doing this are fossil fuel, alcohol, tobacco, ultra-processed food industries, all of that sort of stuff. So when I talk about harmful industries tonight, they're the main ones that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to be giving you guys some case examples from tobacco and alcohol. Now, these industries are incredibly well-resourced. So we're talking trillions in revenue every year. And so they can use those resources to influence public policy and to advertise their products, not just to adults, but also to kids. So I'm going to take you through 3 of the main tactics that these industries adopt, and then we'll end with a game. And so hopefully you're paying attention, because the people who are going to win the game are those that listen really carefully to what I'm saying. So first up, I'm going to talk about product advertising. So I'm assuming most of you, all of you, have a mobile phone. So I'll just get you guys to grab out that mobile phone for me and jump onto a social media platform if you're on social media. If you're not, no worries. If you are, jump onto a social media platform of your choice. Look, if you're on TikTok, I'd probably pick TikTok. If you're not, I'd pick Instagram. If you're not on either of those, and Facebook. And just spend a minute scrolling through your feed. Okay. I think I know the answer to this question already. Raise your hand if you were exposed to some sort of a harmful product. One person? Yeah. That's what I expected. And the reason for that is because you guys aren't the target audience. Children are. So here are some stats. Here is the dry part of tonight. So let's think about children aged 8 to 13 years old, right? Pretty young. Every day they spend online, they're targeted with 13 junk food ads. Let's go to the next age bracket up. Teenagers aged 14 to 17. Every day, they're targeted with 1 instance of gambling marketing, 6 alcohol ads, and 24 junk food ads. 70% of teenagers have reported seeing alcohol advertising in the last month, and most of them are reporting seeing them across at least 3 different channels, so social media, TV, at the football. The online environment is the problematic one particularly. So a recent study came out showing that young kids are exposed to an alcohol ad every 3 minutes that they are online. So let's just have a think about the exposure to that. So these are just averages. In the study that I'm talking about, one teenager in a 2-hour period was exposed to 2 gambling ads, 14 alcohol ads, and 70 junk food ads. That's just in 2 hours. The other tricky thing here is that what companies and harmful industries are starting to do is that they're starting to harvest people's personal data. So it's sort of this tactic that's known as dark marketing. So they are specifically looking at that person behind that phone, and they're using the algorithm and what they're interested in and all the different things. And so when they target these people, the ad is only being targeted to them and it's being tailored to them. The ad is fleeting. And they're also putting that ad, if we're talking about kids, in things like embedding them in things like video games. So we actually have no idea what our kids are being exposed to. And so just to sort of give you guys an idea of the extent to which alcohol marketing and harmful industry marketing in general is infiltrating our kids' lives, my centre administrator here, Ashley, is going to be flashing up behind me some advertising for harmful products roughly every 3 minutes, just to give you guys an idea of what kids are facing, okay? So I'm going to keep going, and when an ad comes up, it'll just come up and I'll keep talking, okay? The other thing is that it's not just how frequently these industries are advertising to kids. It's the way that they are advertising to kids and to the population. So they're targeting kids. They're also targeting priority populations, right? So LGBTQI populations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, they're using this information that they've harvested to directly target these groups that they know might be particularly vulnerable to their products. We know that the tobacco and alcohol industry engages in what we call greenwashing or corporate social responsibility practices. So they'll go out and they will advertise that they are the good guys. They just want to solve the world's problems. They are sustainable. They win awards for their sustainability. But I wonder if anyone can tell me what the number 1 littered product in the world is. Anyone know? The number 1 littered product in the world? Cigarette butts, exactly. So 4.5 trillion butts are discarded annually. But sure, tell me how sustainable you are. Let's give you an award for how sustainable you are. So that's the sort of the nature of the advertising, how often they're doing it, and the content of it, okay? I'm going to move on now to product development. This might be something that you guys are also quite familiar with. So harmful industries excel at creating products that really appeal to kids. So, for instance, we've seen the tobacco industry. We've done a really good job in Australia, and other countries around the world have done a really good job of reducing tobacco. But the industry sort of went, oh God, our shareholders are expecting a profit. What are we going to do about this? And so they invested in vapes. Colourful products, flavorings that mask the harshness of nicotine. And now they're doing that same thing with nicotine pouches. So we sort of realized that vapes were a problem. Countries around the world now introducing laws around vapes. Okay, here's another product. Oh, I've just been interrupted by an ad.
Fans pumped for the 2025 season. So what's in it? Well, this awesome Sharon-inspired Macca's Happy Meal box comes with a collectible bag clip, stickers, and a skill card. There are 18 to collect, as well as 2 plus Sharons. All right, well, I've got mine here, so let's open her up and see what's inside. Jeez, kidding. The Bombers. Not what I wanted, was really hoping for a Dogs one, so I'll be trying to trade this one, and lucky for you can, because Macca's are holding a trading day on the 22nd of March, so jump on their website, check out the info there, make sure you get down. Cheers.
Great. So buy this product, and if you don't get that toy you wanted, go back to Macca's, because they're holding a trading day, and buy more product, right? Great. Okay, so nicotine pouches. So we've seen it with Alco Pops. You know, we know the Bacardi Breezers. They're, you know, the colourful Alco Pops targeted to kids, again, masking that harshness of the alcohol onto the vapes, now onto the pouches. And particularly with the tobacco industry, what they're starting to do with these, what they claim less harmful products, is that they're using that together with their greenwashing corporate social responsibility to claim that they are wanting a better world. Some of the taglines are things like, unsmoke your world, we want a smoke-free future. And they're using this to get a seat at the table. They're using this to lobby governments and say, look, we're on your side. We want the same thing that public health people want. We want to reduce smoking rates. What's missing from that is what they're doing in developing nations. Right? They are blocking tobacco control laws in those nations because those governments aren't as strong as governments such as Australia on tobacco control. So they're doing things like objecting to plain packaging, human rights violations against the local producers there, and that's what gets missed from all of this. And so you have governments who sort of think, oh, okay, yep, seems like you are on the same page as us and you want to unsmoke the world. But what they're failing to see is what's happening in those developing nations. And that's what drives health inequity over there as well. So this brings me to my next tactic, which is industry interference. So we know that there are representatives from all these industries, including tobacco, who are walking the halls of Parliament and are meeting with our politicians to try to undermine, delay or water down public policy that is about protecting the health of Australians. That doesn't fit what they're trying to do around stakeholders. Oh, another one.
Going after our fans. We have a Huntrix meal at McDonald's.
You mean the Sada Boys breakfast meal?
Ours has Ramyun McShaker fries.
Ours has hash browns.
Hash browns.
Zoe!
It's a battle for the fans.
We love you! What?
Now at McDonald's. Pick a meal.
To pick a side. Don't fight. Kiss.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Okay, another one. Not targeting children with that one though, are we? So tobacco, yes. So walking the halls of Parliament, the Nationals actually still accept tobacco industry funding. So they are the only political party now to accept that funding. Obviously, they've formed a coalition government. That means that our current opposition is funded by or receives funding by Big Tobacco. And what these donations do is they provide them with access to the politicians, right? Tobacco industry doesn't do this for nothing. And what we've seen is that those donations actually peak in years where an inquiry is taking place. If an inquiry is taking place on vaping, or as it is at the moment on illicit tobacco, the donations from tobacco industry to the Nationals increase significantly. And we've seen this over the last sort of 6 to 10 years when vape started becoming a thing. A lot of people think tobacco control's done. We don't have to worry about this. We all know that the tobacco industry are bad. So, you know, Australia has signed on to an international treaty, which means we are obligated to make sure that our laws are protected by the tobacco industry. And yet last Monday, Philip Morris, there was the illicit tobacco inquiry in Australia. Philip Morris International, which is one of the, big tobacco companies, they requested and were granted a secret behind closed doors meeting with the government to produce their evidence. So we had our public health people there, and then there were academics sort of representing we should reduce tobacco excise policy. Philip Morris International wanted a secret meeting. They weren't included in the list of the witness list that went out publicly. And it was only because we had some people on the ground that sort of suddenly realized the door was locked and went, what's going on here? And so we think that our laws are being protected when they're not. And we've just found out that actually the same thing happened at the New South Wales inquiries months ago. And we had absolutely no idea. And it was only because an investigative journalist actually found that out. The irony in all of this is that one of the reasons that they were granted this secret closed door meeting appears to be because they were worried about their safety. Right? The irony that this organisation, this company that doesn't care about the safety of the people who use its products is worried about their safety. And the government prioritised that. I should say not the government, but the committee. Some members of the committee prioritised that. Oh, here's another ad. Big splashy Heineken ad on a tram, right? I'm sure everyone's seen this around, right? So this is another way that kids are being exposed to this. And there are examples of ads such as this appearing on school buses even. And so there's a big push around Australia at the moment to prohibit alcohol ads and junk food ads from government-owned infrastructure. So I've mentioned the tobacco industry and what happened last Monday. There's still ongoing debate and letters that we're sending asking for an explanation about that. Alcohol industry was allowed to be in the room when pregnancy warning labels were being debated. And because they were allowed in the room, pregnancy warning labels were never mandated. So they were just a self-regulation thing. We know self-regulation doesn't work. And so now they are on track, or they have been mandated. But the problem is that between the time the decision was made and the time that they were actually mandated was years. So that's years that we have missed to introduce an evidence-based measure that is going to reduce things like fetal alcohol syndrome. But unfortunately, industry was allowed to sit at the table. Example from the junk food industry, the Health Star rating system. I'm sure some of you have come across this when you're purchasing something at the shops, you get the Health Star rating. The food industry was allowed to sit at the table to decide what was being chosen and to decide how that was being implemented. And so again, it resulted in the Health Star rating not being made mandatory. It's now been a few years since that was implemented, and the uptake of that among industry has been very, very low. Okay, and so now the decision has been made to make it mandatory. But we've lost years. We've lost years of that evidence-based measure because industry is being allowed to sit at the table. What else have we got? Front groups. Front groups of front groups. We've seen this a lot in the tobacco space. So British American Tobacco funded Legalise Vaping Australia and Responsible Vaping Australia. Very unclear from the website that it was backed by British American Tobacco. You had to scroll right to the bottom to find out that it was British American Tobacco. In New Zealand, when they were passing, and they did end up passing, but they were subsequently repealed, really world-leading reforms around smoke-free generations and denicotization of cigarettes. The tobacco industry, there was a sort of what appeared to be a grassroots astroturfing campaign. Owners of milk bars or corner stores, whatever. Oh, another one. So this is actually down the road from me. This is, well, what do we think? Is it a candy store or a vape store? Both. So if you walk past this store, there's actually a little animated girl on a sign at the front talking about all the candy. But I've witnessed illicit tobacco being sold from this store. So this is another way that they appeal to kids, right? Kids walking home from school, want to grab a lolly, and they go and pay for the lolly, and there's vapes and illicit tobacco right there being sold. Sorry, the astroturfing campaign. Now, I'm getting distracted by these ads. That's the point. Astroturfing campaigns. So yeah, they are a group of milk bars, corner stores, whatever you call them in Victoria, these laws are going to really harm our business. It's a very common one you get. Mum and dad stores harm our business. They were appeared on the steps of Parliament. There were leaflets handed out, and it subsequently turned out that these milk bar corner store owners were being paid by Big Tobacco to say that, right? To change the media narrative. There was a case in Australia as well during the sort of when the vaping laws were being debated. A tobacco harm reduction group created by doctors. They had a image of a man on their website, and they subsequently went out on social media with the image of this man. And the quote next to the image was something like, "Vapes have helped me quit smoking." Anyway, that man came out and said, "They've taken that photo of me from a stock image on the internet. I've never smoked in my life." But again, they're using that to change the narrative. And you sort of think, well, that's not the tobacco industry. That's a group of doctors. But when you look at the underlying funding of those doctors, they've received funding from the vape industry. So we start to see these little cobwebs of influence and how that doesn't just influence politicians, but also can influence the narrative that's out there for the community and the public and support for policies in the long term. So a lot of examples from tobacco. This is my main area. But in terms of alcohol, the other one of the big companies or front groups in alcohol is Drinkwise. How many of you have heard of Drinkwise? Yeah, very common one. The message they send out, it's all about responsible drinking. And if we go back to the very first thing I said in my presentation, that's very much a responsible drinking because it's your problem. You're the one that needs to fix your drinking, not us. But let's have a look at who's on the board of directors at Drinkwise, this independent group. Spirits and Cocktails Australia, Australian Grape and Wine, the Brewers Association of Australia, and Retail Drinks Australia. How independent do we think they are? Probably not very independent. And these organisations oppose any sort of restrictions to alcohol advertising. They will fight tooth and nail to make sure that their interests are protected. And they do this even against really strong community opposition. So for example, there's actually been some really good local success out in Dalesford. The Endeavour Group wanted to set up a Dan Murphy's and the community said, no, we have a lot of alcohol related harm here. We do not need a Dan Murphy's. And it took years, and that community fought hard and hard and hard for that Dan Murphy's not to be built. And the Endeavour Group just kept taking it higher and higher and higher. It went all the way to VCAT. So you need to have a really strong community behind the push to not have a store built. Because you can imagine after years and years, people would just give up. And that has actually also happened in WA. The Endeavour Group wanted to put a Dan Murphy's right next to a high school. Community opposition to it. I put in an opposition to it. I was back in WA recently. That's where I'm from. Drove past the site that this Dan Murphy's was proposed, and there was the Dan Murphy's right next to a high school. So they just keep fighting, even if the community is dead against something. And unfortunately, our laws aren't quite up to scratch when it comes to supporting the community to then be able to fight it. So for example, for a community to sort of win in these cases, they need to be able to display really strong evidence, not just that alcohol causes harm, because we know that. We know from the evidence that alcohol causes harm. They need to demonstrate that alcohol causes harm in that specific community. They need to have data and evidence, and most communities don't. Most communities are relying on anecdotal evidence, right? I'm walking down the street and I'm seeing this harm. But because there are no stats and data that can be submitted to the local council that demonstrates that, a lot of times community opposition is often just thrown out and the alcohol industry wins. Okay, I've talked about astroturfing campaigns. What else have we got? I mean, honestly, I could go on all night, and I don't really want to. I've talked about the milk bars. Tobacco industry, they're funding GPs. There's actually a GP in Melbourne who was given money by Foundation for a Smoke-Free World, which is funded by Philip Morris International. She was given money to go to high schools and universities to talk about how good vaping is, essentially. Obviously, from her position, rightly or wrongly, is that vaping can help with smoking cessation. There is some evidence out there to suggest that it does. We don't need to be talking to kids about that. Very few kids are smoking. So why are we going to high schools and to universities to tell them about vaping? And given that the funding for that is Philip Morris International, you'd be questioning the sort of education that those kids are being given. The same thing is happening with the alcohol industry worldwide, but also in Australia. The alcohol industry is actually developing programs that are in high schools to teach kids about alcohol. What do we think the message is that they're being given? Drink responsibly. Yep, because it's up to you. If you're a drunk, it's your fault. It's not our fault. So that drink responsibly, gamble responsibly, all of that sort of stuff, a very strong message of individual responsibility. And so that plays out then politically, because a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in government submissions, and also when we try and then introduce restrictions, is things like freedom of choice. How dare you tell me what I should do? I'm an adult. I should be allowed to smoke if I want. And when you're putting in these restrictions, you are taking away my rights as an individual. The irony in that is they're not free because they're addicted to nicotine. So while there is a literal industry there who is taking their freedoms away by producing this product and putting addictive chemicals in it to keep them addicted for life, there's that cognitive dissonance, right? There's industry saying, yeah, but you have a right to do this. You're an adult. You can do what you want. And so when the government comes in and tries to, improve the health of the population, for example, they're the bad guys. They're the ones that are taking your freedom away, not us. I do want to sort of, before we go on to the game, I just want to note I haven't really spoken about the gambling industry. This is a really interesting one. It's not really my area, but I'm across most things in it. And when I talk about the industry, I've obviously been talking about big tobacco and companies that we all know about. But it's also important to think about other commercial interests or vested interests, right? Who else stands to gain from these products or from this product advertising? So here's a specific example with the gambling industry. A few years ago, there was an inquiry into gambling advertising, right? And huge community support for reducing gambling advertising, right? There's far too many ads during sport in particular, and on players' jerseys. It's everywhere, rife. Community overwhelming support for let's get rid of these advertisements. But when testifying at the government inquiry, the NRL and the AFL argued that if we cut gambling advertising, the codes will suffer. Right? It'll affect grassroots footy. We can't do that to the kids. Can't affect grassroots footy. We'll be financially ruined. So let's have a think about that. Australia has the world's highest per capita gambling losses. So $31.5 billion annually are lost to gambling. 3 million Australians experience gambling-related harm, and this includes financial distress, family violence, and mental health issues. So when the AFL, the NRL, the gambling companies go to the inquiry and they say we're reliant on this money, what they're actually saying is we're reliant on Australians experiencing financial distress, family violence, and mental health issues to keep our codes going. And they said the same thing decades ago when tobacco advertising was around. When, the ads for tobacco were on AFL players' jerseys and we wanted to get rid of it. It's the same narrative. It's how are we going to survive as a code? They're doing perfectly well decades later. They pivot onto other things. Grassroots footy, as far as I'm aware, is still going pretty strong. So, like I said, I'm mindful of time. We might go on to the game. Hopefully you guys have been paying attention. So on your seats, there's a harmful industry bingo. So your harmful industry bingo card should have 9 squares on it. Each of those squares corresponds to an industry tactic or strategy. I've spoken about most of them tonight. Okay? So I'm going to show you some real world harmful industry advertising or material. And if what shows up on the screen is something that you have on your bingo card, you can cross it out. Here are some rules though. You can only cross off one box per ad. So if an ad pops up that you think covers a couple of things on your bingo card, you can only cross one thing out. There's no multiples here. Okay? We ready to go? Awesome. So here's the first one. Here's the first one. Okay. What are we seeing here, guys? How to drink responsibly. Ad by Drinkwise. Very Mad Men-like. Some of the other ads in this series were drink like a gentleman. Okay. We ready for the next one? Oh, what have we got here? Views. We pledged it. Now we are the first global carbon neutral vape brand. Join the positive change at views.com. I think Views is British American Tobacco. Ready for the next one? Oh, Heineken. Brew a better world. Oh, they're raising the bar for 2030. Look at that. So responsible. It's always a choice. Remember, it's your choice. Address harmful use. Moderation. What else? Environmental, carbon neutral, circularity, healthy waterways, watersheds. I don't even know what that means. Social diversity, fair and safe, and community impact. Okay. So Heineken, alcohol company. Okay. Next one. Oh, what's this? Lego vape. Yep. You say bingo if you've covered all of them. Yes. Have to make it hard for you guys. A Lego vape. Okay. Next one. Oh, here we go again. Drinkwise. AFL legend and Crow's great Rashudo calls for gather round, moderation and respect. Actually, it looks like this entire article was presented by Drinkwise. Okay, want to leave time for Q&A. So next one. Okay, what's this one? Oh, 2. Okay, what have we got? Omni, forward thinking for a smokeless world. British American Tobacco. What's here? Vapes don't belong in schools. Let's work together to get them out. Responsiblevaping.com.au. British American Tobacco. Okay, high performance, high demand. Most women juggle 2 full-time shifts, work and home. Get the energy tools out. Anyway, that's poor grammar. They keep failing them. Coffee, sugar, energy drinks, quick spike, jitters, crash. These fixes weren't built for non-stop lives. Enter low-dose nicotine. No smoking, no vapes, clean pouches, steady focus, no sugar, no crash, the smarter boost. Brain power, not burnout, sharper focus, more energy, better memory, all at a controlled low dose. Athletic nicotine, sharper, steadier, smoother. What have we got there? Next one. Kids with some McDonald's on their bibs. Next one. What have we got here? Okay, so we've got a nicotine pouch here, limited edition, unlimited love, Velo, celebrates pride. We've got a bingo. Okay, let's check it out. And if you purchase this product, they'll donate some money elsewhere. We've got a bingo here. We'll get Ashley to check it out. Let's see who our winners are. There should be 2 winners in the crowd. We'll get Ash to check it. In the meantime, I'll take some questions. Thanks, guys. Thanks for playing.
Hello. Was this what? Yeah, okay. I had a question just about the social media ban for those under 16. So I just haven't seen much research into how these harmful industries are interacting with that and their thoughts on it as well, and kind of where they stand on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly care about their thoughts on it, but there is a lot of research now that's sort of starting to sort of look at before and after the ban what the impacts is, because there's obviously it's not going to be perfect. What it does is it sends a message that social media can be harmful in some way, especially for younger people. But of course, there are things that we are concerned that the harmful industries might do. The first thing is, as soon as a person hits 16, they're going to be flooded with more ads. They're sort of going to, let's say, just double the ads that these people are being exposed to make up for the fact that they haven't had them for the 16 years prior. So there's some research being done to look at that. And then that's the main thing I think that I'm certainly concerned about, is that's what the industries are going to do. And also that we actually need to be doing a much better job of teaching media literacy as well. So some of the stuff that I was showing you guys today, we really should be teaching kids that as well. Not that education is the answer, because again, that's very much a personal responsibility narrative. We just need to educate our kids, but there needs to be a education combined with restriction.
Hi, good evening. I'm actually not from here. I'm from the Philippines. Okay. So we're learning from Australia in a lot of different ways. I have two questions. The first one is about the messages that industry is sending, government, for example, to counter all of these efforts. So we hear a lot in the Philippines, for example, that what the government is doing is quote-unquote anti-poor, for example, or the science isn't set, especially for social media bans, for example. What are the common, responses? How do we come up with good responses to those kinds of statements? And my second question is related to what she was asking earlier about social media. Are we starting to see these big social media companies acting the same way as tobacco or alcohol or, these other industries that are harmful to children?
Yes, yeah. Welcome. So I think what we need to be doing to combat the narratives that these industries are giving government is we need to be better at lobbying or advocating government. Because the one thing, I was talking to some people earlier about this, one thing that we do as researchers is we really stick to the evidence base. And we know that evidence, there's always a little bit of uncertainty, right? In statistics, you usually less than 0.05% is statistically significant. And so when we write government submissions or when we talk to governments, we'll sort of use hedging in our language. We'll say, well, it's associated with this, or, we've got evidence that suggests vaping is quite harmful. What the industry is doing is they'll say things like, it is a fact that vapes are 95% less harmful. Now that fact was debunked ages ago, and yet you'll still see it come up and you'll still see politicians use it. So I think we need to get better at communicating the evidence in a way that we think politicians are going to really use it well. So one thing that worked in the vaping space, as I personally think the only reason we were able to gain any sort of traction with vaping is two things. The first is we had teachers and principals come out and say, we have a crisis on our hands. We've got too much to deal with in schools. Now we're having to deal with vapes. So those lived experience stories, I think that really helps to combat the narrative. It's not just the industry saying that academics don't know what they're talking about. Try saying that to, the mother of the baby who died because it consumed nicotine, right? That's a much more powerful story. You're going to have to remind me of your second question, the social media ban. I would classify social media agencies as a harmful industry. They have policies in place already to supposedly protect people from advertising, things like vape advertising, etc. Over the last year and a half, I've probably reported about 40 ads that I have seen on Facebook advertising vapes, advertising the sale of vapes. Only one of my complaints was upheld. Now, all those ads breached Meta's policy, and yet they didn't even uphold their own policy. So, yeah, I think we need to be doing more with and holding the social media companies responsible.
Hey, I had a question. When you said about how addicts aren't acting under free choice because they're addicted, could you say the same for fast food and all the chemicals they put in to get people hooked to their sort of food and stuff as well?
I mean, we do know that the food supply needs to be improved. It's slightly better in Australia than it is in the US, where they put those extra chemicals and sugar in a lot of their products. So it is slightly better here. But I think there needs to be a recognition of not just sort of an addiction to the product, but what we call like the broader environment in which we live in. So it's not just, oh, well, I'm addicted to junk food, which I suspect many people wouldn't be. But if you're driving along the road and you see an ad for a McDonald's 2 minutes up ahead, it's easy to purchase that, right? And so this is where that sort of health equity, the environments that we're in, and where the community objection to stores like McDonald's really comes into play. There was an example recently, actually, I think up in Northcote, they're planning on putting a McDonald's, and huge community opposition to it. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people objected. But because, again, our laws aren't playing catch up, that McDonald's was allowed to be in that. So it's the environment with people's desire. These are very palatable foods. We know that. Whether or not they're addictive or not, I'd say regardless of that, they're palatable.
So I was just wondering, obviously not to pigeonhole in terms of personal culpability, but how can we as a population help prevent these corporations from lobbying more power from the government and things like that? How can we work together to kind of to rip away power from these companies?
We talked about this, or tried to talk about this, at the event that we hosted on Monday. So, like us, we had someone from London come over who's an expert in this. And, it's a really difficult question because it seems like a no-brainer, right? It seems like governments should be prioritising the health of the population over corporate profits. We know that's not happening. So what can we do? It's easier for some industries than others. It's easier to argue against the tobacco industry. For some reason in Australia, the alcohol industry is very, very protected. Gambling industry, we've seen some movement of that. I think it really comes, in terms of what the community can do, I think just going back to that lived experience. I had a few students come up to me after the event on Monday saying, oh, look, we want to do more, but we're not researchers. What can we do? And I'm telling you, when the government holds an inquiry or a consultation, submit as an individual. I submit as an individual, but I submit as an individual researcher. But you can submit as an individual with your lived experience. They're the stories that really are going to resonate with them. And, it's hard to often find out what inquiries and consultations are happening. If there's a cause that you're passionate about, even writing to your local MP as well, like what happened in Northcote with McDonald's. So it's those little things that if enough people do them, then we'll gain some traction.
Hi, sorry, my question is regarding children and education to the children regarding addictive things. When you educate them, you expose them. And restriction is very difficult. How do you do that?
So you're saying when we educate them, we have to expose them to what we're educating them about?
And we can't restrict them because tobacco's everywhere, McDonald's is everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, they're exposed every day. They're on social media. They're seeing this stuff. Education is usually pitched at an age where we already know that they're being exposed in some way. This is what I meant earlier when it's we can't just educate. If you listen to harmful industries, education is the solution. We need to get better at educating people and educating kids. But you're right. We can educate them, but if on the way home from school, they're walking past 4 vape stores or 4 stores selling illicit tobacco, then what's that education going to do? Very, very little. So we always argue or advocate for a comprehensive approach, certainly in tobacco control, certainly in alcohol, and where we want it for everywhere. So if we look at the World Health Organization, they often talk about what are the best buys, what are the best things that we can do to reduce harm of alcohol and tobacco and all these other things. And the 3 main things, hopefully I get this right, is increasing the cost of the product, reducing the availability and the accessibility of the product, and restricting advertising. So in Australia at the moment, tobacco stores, there are 40,000 stores selling tobacco for less than 10% of the population. Less than 10% of the population smokes, but 40,000 stores are out there selling tobacco. Let's compare that to the number of service stations in Australia, right? More than 70% of the population drives, yet only 7,000 petrol stations. Okay? 5,000, I'm pretty sure these numbers are right, 5,000 grocery stores, so independent IGAs, Aldi, Coles, Woolworths, 5,000 servicing 100% of the population. Let's think about that when it comes to restriction. So you're spot on. We do need to be, especially in the tobacco space, reducing the supply, because it makes no sense that you have 5,000 grocery stores servicing 100% of the population, but 40,000 tobacconists servicing 10%. Those numbers don't add up. So when we talk about best buys, that's a best buy right there, not education.
Michelle, you mentioned the doctors that are behind some of the fronts.
I can't name them.
I'm not asking for names. I'm asking, can you help us think through what are the ethical considerations of folks who've signed a Hippocratic oath that are engaged in these kind of harmful behaviors?
Yeah, this is another thing that we were talking about on Monday as well, actually, is what makes someone accept money from the industry. And look, it depends on the lens through which you're looking at this problem, right? So there are people who operate at the population health level, such as myself, and then there are people who work at the individual level, such as, GPs. So you can kind of understand that when a GP is seeing a couple of patients a day who are coming to them with nicotine addiction, and then this new product comes along and the industry is telling them this is going to help with their smoking addiction, you should give them this product. I can see how GPs would get sort of lulled into that and go, you know what, I am going to give it a go. And there is evidence out there that vaping can help some people quit smoking. And so then it sort of becomes this, oh, okay, so I gave it to this patient and it helped them, and so now I'm going to keep going. And so the issue then becomes, though, is that individual level efficacy does not mean population level efficacy. So I think there is an ethical debate there around doctors who are doing this. I can see why they're doing it, but I do think that we need to get better at disclosing our conflicts of interest. And that's something I should have done at the beginning of the night. No conflicts of interest for me. I've not accepted money from the industry. But there are doctors out there who should do that. That doctor I mentioned earlier who's accepted money from tobacco industry to go into schools, she did not declare her conflicts, not even to the schools that she was teaching this stuff in. And it wasn't until there was an investigative journalist who came along and said all this stuff, that's all of a sudden that disclosure appeared on her website.
I keep hearing that generation of young people, teenagers and young adults now, are drinking and smoking less than my generation or boomers. Is that true? And what kinds of factors are decreasing the rates of smoking and drinking for younger people?
Yeah, so for alcohol, the trend is, fewer young people are drinking. We still have very high rates of drinking, though, in those populations, and very high rates of harmful drinking. In terms of smoking, the data so far is suggesting that there is a decrease, but it's plateauing. And it seems to have plateaued around the time when vapes came on the market. And there's a lot of evidence out there showing that vaping is 5 times, leads to people who vape are 5 times more likely to then go on to smoke. So again, that industry stuff. So the reason why things are going down, particularly with tobacco control, is because of the great work that we've been doing. The taxes, the restricting advertising as best as we can, all those sort of the plain packaging, smoke-free laws, not being able to smoke in pubs, that sort of stuff we know works. And massive rates of decline. Like we're talking, smoking rates at 60, 70% decades ago. Now we're less than 10%. But it's probably going to uptick up, I think, now that we've allowed vapes in. So the reason it's going down is because of our strong controls, which the industries are fighting against.
Thank you for answering that question. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have this evening. So please join me in thanking Michelle Jongenelis for this amazing talk.
Thank you for listening to the podcast series of Raising the Bar Melbourne, a special health edition. If you want to listen to more Raising the Bar talks, head to rtbevent.com/podcasts.